Man and Goat, The Pilgrimage of Silas. Chapter 1. The Burden of Stone. Silas wasn't a man who had much use for companionship, and even less for sentimentality. He was 35, though the sun and solitude of the high plains had chiseled him to look closer to 50. His life was defined by two things: the mountain and the cart. The mountain, a colossal, rust-colored behemoth called Mount Yarrow, was his home, his livelihood, and his cross to bear. The cart was a rickety, two-wheeled relic, built from reclaimed tractor parts and oak, perpetually overloaded with bags of shimmering black obsidian he mined from a hidden quarry near the summit. Silas's pilgrimage began every Thursday at dawn. He had to haul the cart 5 miles down the treacherous, winding track to the small, dusty town of Red Rock Creek to trade the obsidian, used for fine tooling and ceremonial knives, for the salt, flour, and blasting powder that kept him alive for another week. This Thursday, the fog was thick and cold, smelling of damp rock and pine sap. Silas, wearing gloves patched with thick leather, strained against the heavy rope harness cutting into his chest. The cart, freshly loaded with 400 pounds of raw stone, was an anchor made of gravity itself. He took a step, then another, his worn boots slipping on the loose shale. The work was brutal, the silent agreement he had made with the mountain. "I will take your treasures, and you will take my strength." It was just past the first switchback, where the track narrowed to a single path carved into a sheer drop, that he found her. She wasn't lying down. She was standing perfectly still in the middle of the track, a small, white goat with absurdly long, floppy ears, and a pair of eyes the color of pale amber. She looked clean, out of place, and entirely unconcerned with the fact that she was blocking a fully loaded, 1,000-pound vehicle of stone. "Go on," Silas grunted, pulling on the harness. The cart didn't budge, thanks to the goat standing firm. "Move, you fleck of fluff." "I'm late." The goat blinked, chewed a bit of invisible cud, and gave a tiny, almost apologetic mewing sound. Silas dropped the harness and stalked forward. He was not cruel, but he was impatient with obstacles. He intended to simply shoo her off the path, but when he reached out, the goat didn't bolt. Instead, she pressed her forehead firmly against his thigh, a surprising gesture of trust. "What in the blazes are you doing up here?" he muttered, checking her small, clean ears for a tag. "Nothing." She was either lost or abandoned, a rare domestic goat so far from any farm. He tried to lead her around the cart. The moment he tried to step back into his harness, she panicked, jumping forward and blocking his path again, this time standing squarely in front of the wheels. Silas sighed, a sound of dry, high plains frustration. He didn't have time for this. He needed to be in Red Rock Creek by midday. He tried the only thing he could think of, a bribe. He dug into his jacket for a piece of dried rye bread. He held it out. The goat sniffed it delicately, took it, and ate it in 3 quick, satisfied snaps. Then she turned, gave a short, authoritative maa sound, and began to walk down the trail. And Silas, exhausted, defeated, and immensely curious, found himself picking up the harness and following the little white goat. Chapter 2. The Lesson of the Footing. The next 3 hours redefined Silas's weekly misery. He expected the goat to run off, to get lost, or to just become another obstacle. Instead, she became his pilot. The goat, whom Silas mentally named Phoebe, after a constellation only visible from the high plains, demonstrated an uncanny sense of the mountain's treacherous footing. Whenever Silas struggled to find purchase, Phoebe would plant her hooves firmly on a spot of rock, glance back at him, and wait. Following her exact steps, Silas found solid, firm ground every time. Where the track looked solid but was undercut by recent rain, a danger that had nearly cost him the cart last month, Phoebe would pause, look over the edge, and take a wide detour into the brush, forcing Silas to follow. "She knows this mountain better than I do," he thought, amazed. He had lived on the mountain since he was a child, yet this tiny creature was reading the rock layers, the shifts in the shale, and the dampness of the undergrowth with an instinct that defied logic. At one point they came to a place Silas always dreaded, a long, shallow stretch of loose gravel where the cart often slid sideways, requiring him to brace his legs and take painful, dragging steps. Phoebe didn't go through the gravel. She led them to a tiny, nearly vertical shortcut, a forgotten series of worn steps carved into the hillside by old miners. Silas had always dismissed the path as too steep and narrow for the cart. Phoebe looked back at him, her amber eyes insistent. Silas hesitated, sweat stinging his eyes. "You're mad, goat. This cart will pitch and send us both to the valley floor." Phoebe simply nudged the wheel with her head. Trusting her impossible intuition, Silas adjusted his stance and began to pull. The path was steep, yes, but because the cart was moving vertically instead of horizontally across the loose gravel, the wheels found traction on the hard steps. It was still brutally hard work, but it was efficient. They reached the end of the shortcut in 15 minutes. A trek that usually took him 45 minutes of agonizing, side-slipping labor. Silas dropped the harness, panting, and stared at the goat. He felt a strange combination of irritation and profound gratitude. He had been doing this the wrong way for 20 years. He realized the true secret of the mountain wasn't strength. It was balance and knowledge. And the goat had both. They finished the journey to the edge of Red Rock Creek an hour early. Chapter 3. The Price of Salt. Red Rock Creek was a small, mean town, built entirely from the red shale it sat upon. Its only major economy was servicing the few mountain miners like Silas. Silas secured the cart behind the general store run by Mrs. Elms, a woman with a face like dried leather and a heart of cold quartz. "Early this week, Silas," Mrs. Elms remarked, her eyes immediately calculating the exchange. "Less obsidian this week, I hope. Prices are down." Silas didn't bother arguing. He knew the drill. The less desperate he looked, the less she would press him. "4 bags, Mrs. Elms. Same as always." "Good quality." Phoebe, meanwhile, stood calmly beside the cart, watching the bustle of the town. She seemed to draw curious glances, not for being a goat, but for her unusual cleanliness and stillness. While Silas weighed the obsidian, a man approached Phoebe. He was a wealthy-looking foreman from the lowlands named Jarek, recognizable by his crisp linen coat and his aggressive scent of tobacco. Jarek didn't ask. He simply grabbed Phoebe's long ear. "Well, well, look at this beauty. A purebred Angora, I'd wager. What business has a fine animal like you got with this mountain rat, eh?" Phoebe let out a sharp, ear-splitting bleat, a sound nothing like her soft mewing from the mountain. Jarek immediately recoiled, releasing her ear. Silas stepped in front of the goat, his jaw tight. "She's not for sale, Jarek. Move along." "Not for sale?" Jarek chuckled, eyeing the goat's pristine coat. "She's worth more than the whole load of your black dust, Silas. I'll give you a fair price. 50 gold coins." 50 gold coins was a fortune, enough to buy 5 years' worth of supplies and upgrade his mining equipment 10 times over. It was the kind of money Silas had never even seen. Mrs. Elms paused her weighing, her eyes glittering with interest. "That's a good offer, Silas. A goat is just another mouth to feed." Silas looked down at the goat. Phoebe simply looked up at him, her amber eyes steady, as if waiting for a simple answer to a simple question. She had saved him time, saved him pain, and led him safely through the mountain's hidden paths. She was his guide, his pilot, his companion. "No," Silas said firmly, the sound of his own voice surprising him. "She's not for sale." Jarek sneered. "Have fun starving with your goat, old man." He walked away, but Silas knew the kind of man Jarek was. He wouldn't forget the goat. Silas finished the trade, took his bags of salt and flour, and led Phoebe back toward the mountain. The cart was empty now, lighter, but the weight of the gold offer, and the sudden realization that he cared about the goat, weighed on him more than the obsidian ever did. His lonely life had just